Welcome back to the Ortho-k podcast. My name is Matthew Herzberg, and I am the Executive Director of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. What I had planned for this episode was to continue our three-part overview series of the Vision by Design agenda and program, but then something fantastic happened. Recently on the private Facebook group ODs on Facebook, there was a post asking some really great questions about whether or not myopia control was worth it. And I loved the post so much and the conversation that got started in its comments that I thought, why not get 3 myopia control specialists to weigh in on the post and have a discussion. Carrie Herzberg, Paul Levine, and Matthew Martin joined me for almost a full hour, and boy did they have a lot to say on the subject. So this episode is going to run a bit longer than usual, but I assure you there's a lot going on, and it is certainly worth it. But before we get to the discussion, I want to mention that if at any point during this podcast you're considering bringing a myopia control program to your practice, or maybe you already do myopia control, but you want access to the very latest in current trends and research, you should consider coming to Vision by Design in San Antonio, May 15th through the 19th. VBD is the ultimate myopia control meeting with an incredible program that you need to be a part of if myopia control is important to you. For our listeners, we have a promo code VBD2019 that you can use to save $50 on all practitioner bundles and registrations. So go to orthokmeeting.com to learn more, view the agenda, get venue information, and of course, to register. That's orthokmeeting.com and use the code VBD2019 at checkout to save $50. So now we will head into the discussion, and the overview series will pick back up in the very near future. All right, I have on the line with me 3 board members of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. First is Paul Levine, the president of the AAOMC. Next is Carrie Herzberg, chairman of the board of directors. And then we have Matthew Martin, who is an active speaker in our boot camp for newcomers coming up at Vision by Design, May 15th. 16th is the boot camp. The whole program is May 15th through the 19th. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor.
So the reason why I've asked you guys to come on is recently on a private Facebook group for ODs on Facebook, we've seen a recent post come up that I'm not going to mention the person who posted it because it is a private forum. So in the interest of keeping that privacy, I'm only just going to read out the post. And I really like this post, and I'm really glad that the person decided to post it because I think it's important. It's an important question to ask. I think he has a lot of valid points, and I really like the discussion that it started. And I thought it would be really nice to have the 3 of you on so that we could kind of talk about some of those points. He says, "I know this may sound controversial, but I will throw it out there. I am not convinced that myopia control is worth the effort in most cases and will make a meaningful impact on the myopia epidemic. Sure, I could see it if the kid is in danger of going more than, say, -7, but those aren't common. I have played around with the Brian Holden Myopia Institute calculator, and sure, I can see where diopters can be saved. And I can understand the cost on taking time off to get an eye exam, and glasses contacts is a burden on the economy, and as well as some pathology that you are more at risk of by having myopia. I just don't know, though, how much we have improved the quality of life of a kid who was destined to be -5 and stop him at -3, for example. She will still need correction to drive and generally function. And I don't know that the retina risk is substantially different between those two. I am just curious what most people here believe philosophically about it." So Carrie, I want to start with you first
Okay.
because I think I think the most important thing is that we start off is about the myopia epidemic. And so I want to ask you, how does myopia control make a meaningful impact on the myopia epidemic?
Well, thanks for doing this, Matt, and allowing us to be part of this. Uh, you think it's a numbers game, is what it is. The incidence of myopia worldwide in the U.S. is rising dramatically, and because it's a numbers game, and we're talking about percentages, when the amount of myopia increases, oftentimes the degree and percentages increase as well. And we're talking here about being a numbers game. A certain percentage of those myopes are going to become high myopes, especially if they start young in life because they have more opportunity. So obviously, being a numbers game and rising to over 50% incidence by the year 2050, we have a significant, well, close to 1 billion people that will be high myopes. And that is a problem because in high myopia, we cite the fact that diseases are much more likely. There's 4 of them that we are really specifically worried about: glaucoma, cataracts, retinal detachments, and myopic macular degen. And these all are shown to rise dramatically after 5 diopters of myopia. And after 7, it's even more dramatic. So if we can make a meaningful contribution here, let's say clip 50% of that myopia progression, then you're going to affect the amount of high myopia by at least 75%.
That is a really significant number. That's a really significant impact. 75% of those people over -7. That is a big number.
Yes, it is. It's a significant number, and when you talk about quality of life, I mean, being high myopia, that's a disability. I mean, being that degree of myopia, I mean, you're dependent, and why go through that thing if you can avoid it? That's all we're saying. I mean, being the compassionate individuals that we are, we want to help patients, do less harm.
And based on you saying high myopes, and I'm going to throw this over to Paul real quick. For the original poster, -7 or more was the point for myopia control to be meaningful. And all 3 of you have myopia control programs in your practice, do a lot of Ortho-k, etc. And Paul, I wanted to ask you, at what point is myopia control meaningful for you and your patients? Realistically, how common are those patients in your practice? Because I think in this first part, he said that, typically, he can see it for -7 or more, but those patients aren't that common. So my question is, at what point do you step in? And then realistically, how common are those patients in your practice?
Well, first of all, I believe it's -5 is what the World Health Organization considers as high or severe myopia. But I can tell you, the first thing when I read that post that stuck to me was just that line. After -7, he says, but those aren't common. The problem is they're becoming more common all the time. Since I started doing this, I'm seeing younger kids coming in at higher amounts of myopia than ever before. There was a Brian Holden group did a study in 2016 called the Global Prevalence of Myopia and High Myopia and Temporal Trends from 2000 through 2050. And what they found, or what they project, is that we're going to go from 2000 to 2050, the world population of myopia will go from 30% to 50%. And that's a 1.7 times change over that 50-year period of time. But during that same 50-year period of time, they're projecting 2.7% of myopes are high myopes, and that number over that 50-year period of time will jump to 9.8%. So that's a 3.6 times. So in other words, we're not only are we becoming more myopic at a given rate, but we're becoming more highly myopic at twice that rate. So we're going to be seeing more cases of -7 and above. It's coming. It's already happening. We've all already seen it in our practices. That's been the trend. When we see 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds coming in already at -3, -4, -5, we need to be concerned, and we need to do something about it. I think it was Ian Flitcroft who said there is no safe amount of myopia. So myopia management, there's more to myopia management than just myopia control. because we're also improving a lot of quality of life issues here too. So to me, there also is no safe degree of myopia. I'm not saying that I put every myopic child into a myopia control program, but I think about it. And I don't think there's any responsible OD out there that looks at a patient sitting in their chair whose prescription is -5 or -6 or -7 and doesn't think a little differently about their risk factors than somebody who's a +1 or a plano or a -1. We all know that problems do happen when numbers go higher. So I think that when you take any case given and you look at ethnicity and you look at family history and you look at entry point of myopia and you look at binocularity, that's where you really have to put your myopia management and myopia control hat on. So I don't think you can necessarily just call it a number. There's just, there are too many other, things involved here.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, Paul. I think it's an immediacy issue with the doctors. When I go traveling worldwide, it's on the agenda. It's the first thing everybody talks to me about. When my patients come into my office who are largely Indian and Chinese, their parents are concerned for their child's eye health and what their child's future is going to be like. In this country alone, we've had a 60% increase in myopia over the last 25 years, and this country will be among those that will be over 50% incidence of myopia by the year 2050. Though we don't have that, what I think is lacking here at a lot of our practitioners is that immediacy that I see every place I go to worldwide, that has this issue. Now they're dealing with it. I mean, 96% incidence in China among the university level students. The government calls it the #1 health priority, to deal with this thing. We need that kind of immediacy and action here in the States to deal with this.
What I find really interesting about his comment about not having a lot of patients above -7 is so much of that's geographic in nature too. When we talk about 50% worldwide, am I correct in saying that there's areas that are maybe as high as 70 or 80%? And then there's areas that are going to be much lower, rural areas or areas that don't have as much screen time opportunity. So you have to remember that you can only view the world from where you stand. And so maybe this person's patient base doesn't have that many myopes, or maybe that many high myopes, but that doesn't apply to everybody's practice setting, and certainly doesn't apply to different areas of the world where Carrie, for instance, has been.
Also a great point, Matthew. And I think also, what we're talking about here is look at situations where we're seeing this firsthand in India. India today has a 20% incidence of myopia in its population, but by the year 2050, it's going to grow to over 50%. You're talking about 1.4 billion people. This is a healthcare catastrophe. And basically, it's being brought on by things that we as eye doctors can help our patients avoid, or at least eliminate many of the risks that are associated with it. And a lot of these things don't cost anything. They're just behavioral changes. So I can't, in my own mind, justify someone that sits by and watches a young little person watching their eyesight get worse when there's things that they can do for them right away.
Yeah, and I'll make a point that I've seen in my practice with Indian population is that they're presenting at much higher numbers. It's not uncommon for me to see somebody as young as maybe even 6 years old that's -2 or -250 or even higher. I'm seeing that more and more.
Well, I guess my question is then, given if we're just talking about, sticking to the post that starts at -7, because in the post it also says if a child is destined to be -5 and is stopped at -3, how big of an improvement is that to the child's quality of life?
I was wrestling with this question this weekend and speaking to one of my colleagues who is a -5.5. And one of the things that he was saying to me was that if he was a -3, it would allow him, for instance, to read easier without his glasses on because of the divergence issue associated with his high prescription. He was saying that there were a number of things that even gaining that 2 diopter difference would improve the quality of his life, his ability to walk around his bedroom, his ability to see things in his house. Even at a -3, he may need correction for a lot of it, or for outdoor activities, for driving. But the navigation of being inside his own house, for instance, is a lot easier at -3 than it is at a -5, -6, -7, etc. So even though that difference may not seem like a large amount, it can make a big difference for people.
There is a cosmetic issue about spectacles. You know, if you're a -3, your glasses are going to look a lot better than if you're a -5. I mean, everybody's very concerned about how thick their lenses are, how minified their eyeballs look inside the glasses. You know, so there are multiple quality of life issues between being a -3 and a -5, and one of them is cosmetic.
We do a lot. Great point, Paul. And we do a lot of LASIK with our patients post Ortho-k. I love, I think LASIK is a great procedure. And, a lower prescriptions, you don't have to thin that corneal bed out as much. It's a lot safer procedure to do a -3 than a -5 given a patient. So why would you subject someone to maybe some adverse effects from having LASIK surgery later on because you allowed their prescription to go that high and you had to thin the corneal bed out enough to make it, so they could see 20/20? There's a lot of compelling reasons here. We've all made some great points as to why you don't do that for your patient, why you would not do that. You would control it.
Yeah, it's another good point.
Well, maybe it's my ignorance on the matter because I'm not an optometrist. My role in this is I run the AAOMC. And so when I ask this question, keep that in mind. But at the growing rate of the myopia epidemic in which Paul described earlier, I mean, when you have a young kid in the chair, I mean, wouldn't it be in your best interest for the care of the patient, given the trends that we're looking at, to try to control their myopia to the best of your ability because you don't know where it's going to go?
Absolutely. I mean, it's and the crazy thing is this: there's a couple of things that I think it's important to get out here that all of our colleagues need to stop doing. Okay, and because of some habits that are existing today, our patients, their vision's getting worse over it. And one of those is a prescription of single vision glasses for patients who are progressive myopes. I mean, there's no way that you should be prescribing glasses, single vision, or contacts, or whatever it is, for patients who's susceptible to progressive myopia. I mean, this shouldn't be happening anymore. Yet I see this again and again. The other things is it's just habit forming. It's explained to patients proper working distances, proper visual hygiene habits. This is my big deal. I go around, teach this around the world now, visual hygiene, because believe me, when we go to the dentist, we all understand what it is like to take care of our teeth. In fact, I ask my patients, they know brushing, flossing, right? They know to watch the diet. Mm-hmm. But as far as visual hygiene is concerned, it's a blank. They don't have a clue. Their parents don't even have a clue. And the school systems with these lighted displays, it's Chromebooks, everything else they're giving them for, constant use, are aiding to the problem. So this visual hygiene area, this is somewhere that we didn't get a lot of this in school, but we need as eye care providers, practitioners, to really start telling our patients about these, that they can be doing things that are free of charge that will basically eliminate a lot of this progressive myopia.
When I talk to my patients about it, I tell them, historically, we took a very reactive role to managing nearsightedness. We prescribed for it, and then if it got worse, we prescribed differently, and then if it got worse, we prescribed more, and then if it got worse, we prescribed more. I said today we have the luxury of being able to take a more proactive approach and helping, and the things that we do now can very positively impact where this amount of myopia ends up. So I try to explain it to my parents that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when you explain this situation to parents, because I have heard this response before, in that, somebody might say, look, even well-educated parents may be resistant to take the full steps to put their kid in a myopia control program. And I can kind of see the point of it being like a huge uphill battle. I mean, what would you advise? I'm going to throw this over to Matthew. What would you advise to working with those kind of situations? I mean, how do you implement a myopia control program? How do you convince or educate the parents?
First of all, if I have a parent who's nearsighted, of any significance, a -4, -5, -6, those parents are very enthusiastic about not having their child be like they are prescription wise when they're adults. So it surprises me how very motivated the parents are to having some assistance with controlling their myopia. So I'm surprised that people are running into the resistance, because I'm not getting as much resistance as you might expect on that. Most of the people who are significantly nearsighted really would like to save their children from having to be in that position. So I find that to be not too hard to explain in most cases for me.
Do you know what's really crushing about this thing too, which you look at what you're dealing with here? The parents of these kids, a lot of them, like I said, a lot of my patients are from China originally. The parents of these kids ruined their eyesight in grad school. Okay, they went through most of life without being myopic, and then they did grad school and they got nearsighted. Their kids are sitting in my chair at 7 and 8 years of age. They have prescriptions that are very similar or even stronger than their parents. They're just beginning life, and the parents, everybody looks like deer in headlights, like they just like, what do I do about this? This is scary. So one of the things we can, as Matt has mentioned, that one of the things we can is to, the education of our patients. I like to tell my parents and my kids, I know you're worried about this, but let me be the one to worry for you. I said, I'm going to do everything I can to help you with the situation. And if I end up telling you to start being worried, then you can be worried. But I wanted to lift that off your shoulders, because I, as your eye doctor, can do that for you. It's a humane thing that we do today that, we need to, I mean, a doctor who does this kind of work, it's a feel-good kind of thing, I mean, I go over the world with this thing. I take care of my patients the same way. It's a bountiful thing, because everybody gives back to you again. But it's something that when you finish the end of the day, you might be really tired, because you've really talked and explained and really got into it with your patients. But you did good, because you're helping these people. I mean, just the simple things about telling a patient to go outside, more, spend more time in daylight. These are free things, and I can't understand why you wouldn't want to do this for another human being.
And I think the visual hygiene thing that Carrie spoke about earlier is such an absolutely amazing, important thing that we as eye doctors just do not educate enough. That is such a huge mitigating factor on the progression of these children.
So visual hygiene, explain that to me.
It's the process. It's like anything else with dental hygiene. It's like taking care of your eyes the proper way. Our body's a temple. It comes back from that concept of actually honoring our body as well as our mind to that point that we take care of it. And so we know how to do that. The dental industry has been incredibly efficient about teaching dental hygiene, but we eye doctors, as Matthew has remarked here, do a lousy job of teaching visual hygiene. It can be a simple thing like not holding objects too close. I show my patients, every last one of them, what the Harmon distance is about, which is basically knuckles to the edge of the elbow with the knuckles on your chin. And I tell them that Harmon distance, everything's beyond that when you hold things. When you read or when you look at displays, it's got to be beyond that Harmon distance. That's a comfort zone for you. If it's inside the Harmon distance, that's where stress could occur. And so it's really important to get, because these kids don't know where to hold. Their parents will come and say they're right on top of this thing, and they are. They're right on top of it. This lighted display or whatever it is, they're reading, whatever they're doing. They need to hold things further away, sit up straight in the chair. Good spinal cord has been shown to actually, the eyes do respond to the curvature of the spinal cord. All these things are important. Lighting, having adequate lighting. I mean, we understand now that full daylight is a healthy thing. And the indoor lighting is usually not quite to that, not even close to that. So again, it's a basic thing. And what it really boils down to is sitting down with your patients, taking the time to explain these things. Doctors worry today about, will the patient come back to see me again? Having patients return to the practice is a big concern with all the competition out there. If you spend the time with your patients, they're going to return. Okay, they're going to come back to you because you're the one who did that for them. No one else has done that. No one else probably will.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's when it comes to my regular doctor, my annual checkup, if a doctor won't take the time with me personally to answer every question I have within reason, I don't want to take up their whole day. But if they won't take the time to be thorough, to talk with me, to give me that, what I consider, me personally, just a baseline of respect, I don't want to see them as a practitioner, because we live in this world of like, there's very minimal attention on the customer, and when it comes to being a patient, I want to feel like my healthcare provider cares about my health. So I think that's an important point. And when it comes down to it, you mentioned the risks of retinal diseases, because I know that came up in the original post. So what are the risks of retinal diseases associated with the increase of myopia? And then the follow-up question for that, is there evidence that shows that myopia control actually decreases these risks? Paul, what do you think?
Well, let me take the second question first. I mean, are there studies that prove that myopia control will reduce the risk of retinal disease? Well, I don't know. I don't think so. But if we know that retinal disease risks are higher in higher myopic people, then it just seems to make common sense that if you prevent someone from becoming a high myope, then they're probably going to have less likelihood of high myopic related retinal disease. Doesn't that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. So when people say, like I said to you before, when someone is sitting in your chair and they're a myope of -7 or -8, you're thinking to yourself, well, there's no way I'm not doing a very thorough retinal examination on this patient, because I have concern that there's higher risk here. Now, I'm not saying you don't do a thorough retinal exam on a -1, but every single eye doctor out there knows I better look at this -8 a little bit more carefully. Right? You gentlemen agree?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do I need a study to tell me that? Like, no. If I can reduce the amount of people that I see that's -6 and above, then I know I'm going to be reducing the amount of retinal disease that I'm likely to encounter. So there are definitely studies that show evidence of pathology, higher related pathology to higher amounts of myopia. I will mention another study that I was reading about that from Dr. Ian Flitcroft, and an ophthalmologist in Ireland, and he collected a lot of data which basically showed a risk ratio jumps for maculopathy, in myopic maculopathy, jumps from about 10% in up to -5. It jumps all the way to 40% between -5 and -7. That's a tremendous change. Retinal detachment rates can jump from about 9% in the under -6 group to over 20% in the over -6 group, and then when you get to -9, it jumps to almost 45%. And Matt, I can send you some of these numbers that
for sure,
if you want to have access to them. So. Yeah. If somebody says to me, well, prove that myopia control will stop retinal disease, or prove to me that if I do myopia control, this person won't have retinal disease. Well, I can't do that, but I can tell you common sense dictates and experience examining eyeballs dictates that bigger, longer, higher prescription eyes have problems related to being bigger and longer and stretched eyes. I mean, it's sort of a one-to-one relationship in my mind.
And then if you explore the comorbidities associated with high blood pressure and heart disease, the correlations there, I think I just read or saw recently, are very similar to the correlations between being above a -5. So that's very telling, because if you're in your physician's exam chair and your blood pressure is above 160, or you smoke, it is your physician's obligation to tell you that you need to stop those behaviors, because there's a high correlation between those behaviors and having a stroke or a heart attack. So I feel as though we have the same obligation for discussing myopia control because of those relationships with the comorbidities of maculopathy, retinal detachments, cataracts, etc.
And talking about studies and evidence, it always takes time to do these things, and it occurs to me that even as recently as the 1960s, they didn't realize that high blood pressure, hypertension caused blindness. Okay. I mean, all the things they'd done up to that point, that wasn't a direct, they couldn't make that association until later. And I mean, this is something so obvious today, for us that this is a risk factor for that. I mean, if you're going to wait for all the data to come in here, you're doing a disservice to the present generation of patients you're dealing with. And personally, you're feeding into this epidemic, which is something that I think humanity-wise we have to deal with. So there's a question here about what the more humane thing would be.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to I think it was Paul that said it, where he said that the history, I don't want to quote this exactly, but I think what Paul was saying was that in the past, it's been more of a reactionary standard of care. Is that what you said, Paul? Okay.
Yeah.
So given that it was more of a reactionary standard of care, and knowing that the myopia epidemic presents, the problems that it doesn't it then make more sense to be proactive?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's the only path forward for a practitioner really, is dealing with this thing and wants to really, take care of the issue. I mean, at least, and I can't personally, like I said again, I can't understand why you wouldn't instruct your patients on proper visual hygiene, and taking care of their young weebies' eyesight, that young little one's eyesight, because this is our future generations.
I'm sorry, Carrie, go on.
No, myopia, it's okay. Myopia is an aging disease. Okay, let's get this clear. It's an aging disease. The damage is done young usually, but I have patients in my late 30s that are still getting more myopic that come to my practice because no one else is addressing their progressive myopia by doing anything about it. And by their 5th and 6th decade of life is when this stuff starts manifesting. So you are committing this to, it's like playing Russian roulette with the human eye. Why even take a chance? If you could cut this thing back by at least 50% with current technology, current things we can do, why wouldn't you do that for someone?
The point that I was going to make is what I find interesting is these statements of, well, I don't do myopia control, which I just don't understand, because to me, at least in my philosophy, it is the standard of care. You treat the patients as they come into your office. Specifically doing myopia control, it shouldn't be thought of that way. It should just be thought of, well, this is how we manage myopia in 2019.
Exactly.
And then not only that, but managing myopia could be as simple as starting with a visual hygiene discussion like Carrie's talking about.
Definitely.
It could be just as something like, hey, I am managing myopia by addressing it. Even if you're not going to get into atropine or peripheral defocus contact lenses or orthokeratology, at least you're starting the conversation about myopia management via myopia control. I mean, it's a place to start.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll add on to there too. It's like when sometimes you hear doctors say things like, I don't do binocular vision. And, again, I don't really know what that means. You should be assessing binocular vision skills on all your patients. If they have a binocular vision anomaly that you're not comfortable dealing with, then refer to somebody that does vision therapy or somebody that can deal with it. So, but controlling myopia and managing myopia is so inherently what we do. It's right. And I just think that we have to, again, we do things differently than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because we know more and we have more tools at our disposal. So I think this philosophy is, should I or should I not do myopia control? Just myopia management in 2019 should be done this way. This should be the standard of care, in my opinion.
I agree. Talking about binocular vision disorders, I mean, it's, trying to treat a ESA4, progressive myopia, ESA4 with single vision lenses. There ought to be a crime against this thing. I mean, you're making that patient worse. You just put them in something as easy as a PAL or a bifocal, and you're going to be able to make life a lot richer for them and slow that myopia down, if not stop it.
Yeah.
So, 20% of our young patients have, convergence insufficiency when they walk through our door. How many of us are diagnosing that? Binocular vision, amen. Let's start doing our job as vision specialists, shall we?
Well, I'm glad you said that at the end there, because I have to imagine that there's a fair amount of pressure on the average OD when they hear about myopia control, the myopia epidemic. And I see that a lot of the myopia control message hinging on the stance that ODs have an obligation to offer myopia control. I mean, would the three of you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I feel as though that's exactly true. It to some degree, and even if it starts with something simple or starts with something not as complicated, to get the doctor used to thinking that way.
That's my point is it seems like that those folks out there who are trying to ring the bell as loud as they can and saying the same kind of message, like, look, y'all have an obligation to do this. And I spoke with, I think it was at Seco, I spoke with a doctor who said, yeah, I'm starting a myopia control program. And he said, the way that I see it is in the very near future, if you're not offering myopia control to your patients, it's malpractice. Those are his words, not mine. But I thought that was an interesting stance to take. And I wonder how that's received amongst the average OD who's looking at this situation and saying, like, is this something I should do or is it not? And so what I'm wondering is like, where is is the message being received negatively, or is it just a matter of education?
I think it's a matter of education, because if you have a patient in your chair whose pressures are consistently in the mid to high 20s, even if they don't have an optic nerve head defect, as a doctor, you have to start worrying about where those increased pressures are going to lead that patient over time. So that's us thinking ahead about a disease state that's potentially going to affect this person. So if you start thinking about myopia of significance or myopia in general as being a disease state, then that brings us to things like visual hygiene, things like trying to manage it, so that I think really in the future, people should start thinking of it as a disease or as an impending future crisis like Carrie was talking about in the mid-50s.
So how do we educate the practitioner then? I mean, I see a lot of, anytime you bring up myopia control, at least on Facebook, instantly you start seeing comments of people saying, where are the studies? What are the studies? Show us the proof. And so my question is, where are the studies? Where can people find these resources?
A lot of the studies are available online. There's different myopiacontrol.org. There's different websites that you can go to access these things. Our own website has some study access as well. They're readily available. The problem here is that you can't, even with the studies, as Paul mentioned, you can't take a patient and say, if I do myopia control on him, then he'll have 50% less likelihood of pathology. We just don't know. We don't know if that patient's going to have pathology or not. We're not at the point of our studies and our research that we can actually make a statement like that. But that doesn't mean that keeping that patient under 5 diopters isn't a benefit for them, even with the likelihood that they maybe they won't get pathology. But we just talked about many different things. Quality of life, a big issue. Quality of life to that patient. Where does it come in that do no harm, right? Is this really, are we not doing harm by turning our back on maybe inexpensive ways to control this so this patient doesn't get that degree? Yes, is this not malpractice? I mean, I don't think, I hate to have that term used, but and I don't think we need to scare people, but obviously if we're not doing our job to control that, this disease, which I consider myopia to be a dis-ease of the eye, then I mean, who is going to do this? Who's going to step up and take this role?
It's ours. I mean, we're the refractive management specialists.
Let's own it. Let's own it. What's wrong with owning it? I see today where the medical community, the kind of pressure it's on right now, and look at the poor physicians. We got PAs, everybody else stepping in. I don't know about you guys, but I want to go see my MD. But a lot of times he's not around, and that's because he's been delegated out of business. Basically, there's all these people doing this other kind of job. Well, really, they need the central core person, the MD, to be doing the preventive care. He's not allowed to be doing a lot of it, or she, because of the constrictions of the present day system. Do we allow the system then to dictate to us the kind of care we want to give to our patients? I don't think so. I think we honor what we are as ODs, as vision specialists, as ophthalmologists, and we take care of this problem, for our patients.
So what does that look like then in our world, I guess? Like for an OD, what does that look like? what kind of challenges is the modern OD facing in this circumstance, and how can a myopia control program help that out?
Well, if you start the basic thing, you start with you had to have a pediatric practice, okay? Because you can't, unless you get to these kids early, and I mean early, you got to get them before school starts, basically preschool time, if not before that. So you got to build a pediatric practice, and a lot of times I go through and talk to my colleagues. It's how do you get patients, young patients to your practice? There are some really very straightforward ways of doing that. That's actually, I did it very simply by just talking to my parents and telling them that I was interested in this. I was interested in their kids, asking about their kids, asking how many they had, especially my myopes. I'm sure you guys are doing the same thing, and saying, you know what, why don't you bring them in? Let's just do a general health exam, and see where they're at with this.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier talking about the dentists, and everybody knows the dental hygiene skills, and they don't necessarily know the visual hygiene skills. But the other thing that they don't know, everybody knows you bring your kid to the dentist at 3, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But nobody knows when you bring your kid to the eye doctor.
That's right. I mean, only do
not know.
Yeah, only in the states where we actually have mandatory vision exams before school, like Illinois was one of the first ones.
Yeah,
we got
which
that
is
right.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how did that happen? I mean, because I got to tell you, if I had to choose between my teeth and my eyes, I would take my eyes every single time. Like, I'd rather keep my eyes.
Do you know how it happened? I'll tell you how it happened in our state. Was the fact that we had a parent that had a child, an amblyopic child that was that wasn't diagnosed. Okay, went through all these screenings and they were missed. And finally, they came to the age of 9 and 10 when you can do a whole lot less for them. And this parent was so motivated, she went down and downstate and she got in the face of all the legislative people until they finally bowed to her because she wouldn't allow another child to experience the same thing that her youngster did because of neglect, because the child never had a real eye examination. I mean, school screenings are great, but they miss a lot of stuff. I mean, that's why you have eye doctors. That's why you have physicians to give them that medical exam that they need. And so this parent got that done in this state, which is amazing because she just didn't want to see another victim, Like we don't want to see another victim to high myopia. I walk into my practice, I got a patient referred to me, -14 from a very well-respected clinic. -14, guys.
That's
and
crazy.
I did Ortho-k on this thing. You believe it or not, I did this. Yeah, with 3 diopters of astigmatism, and they gave it to me. Yes.
How old was this person?
14 years old.
So what happened when they were 6 and 7 and 8 years old?
They gave atropine, everything else later on. It didn't work. They tried everything.
Oh,
they said,
wow.
"Yeah, we got to do." Yeah, I know. Let's not be there. Let's not have that patient be there. Okay. I don't. She's just ecstatic now because she can make it. She has to wear glasses at night for driving. That's it. And everywhere else she can get around. She's got a 20/40 vision. She's amazing. Awesome. She takes so much freedom. And you know what? I feel so honored to be able to do that for her. But let's not see these victims. I get 7-year, like Paul was saying, I get these 7-year-olds, they're matching their prescription. I mean, I don't want to see these patients anymore at that degree because of neglect. I want to see them brought in early. I want to see them treated early. This is my view of vision care in the future. That we get these patients into our practices so they don't become that. In China right now, they're trying to screen these people out so they pick them out early. Okay, they have huge databases, crunching in Shenzhen and other places, where they're trying to find these patients early on so they can get them into the clinics, get them treated fast. And some of it's genetic and hereditary, but it's also a lot of other factors that are coming into play in this thing. That's what we need, a huge database of information on this thing. You want to know how we can prove this stuff? Let's take myopia seriously. Let's start motivating everyone to get involved with this thing. This is a catastrophe happening. Over 50% in this country by the year 2050. That's an amazing number. Okay, and that's not even the worst of it, because we got 350 million people? Try that on 1.4 billion. Try that on 2 of the most populous countries in the world. Try that to put that into the healthcare system and see how that computes as far as healthcare costs. Trillions? For starters.
Yeah, well said. And
I
have to wonder, because the rate of myopia over in Asia is different than it is in the United States. And it makes me wonder if it was as bad here as it is currently over there, would we be having a much different conversation? Would we even need to have this conversation? And at the rate in which this is progressing, then it sounds like that conversation should be happening now before it gets to a point. And that's why I liked what the original post. That's why I'm glad he posted it. There's nothing wrong with everything that he said. It's important to ask questions. It's important to be a critical thinker. It's important to say, these are my concerns and I need them addressed.
I think that's absolutely right, Matt.
And one of the things that I will mention, and of course this is the group to talk about it with, but when you talk about if Ortho-k is your preferred method of managing myopia, there's such an incredible amount of quality of life improvement that you gain. So it's not just about making sure someone who's destined to be a -5 only becomes a -3. It's about improving the quality of life for that child now and forever. So I always say to the parents, I say, from the child's perspective, they get to see clearly and they get to live like they have normal eyesight and they don't have to fuss with glasses and they don't have to wear contact lenses to do that. And you don't have to worry about them jumping into the swimming pool with their contacts in. That all goes away. They're happy. But we, the doctor and the parents, feel like we're doing something proactive to help shape this person's future in a much more positive direction. So it's like a win-win across the board.
Yes, I have many nearsighted children who I'm a big Ortho-k fan. I have no problems with the other ones, but that's my favorite thing to do. And my children, my myopic kids, love it. It just happens to be slowing down the progression of their myopia. Awesome. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It is. It's a life changer. It takes that little child and makes them a different individual. You watch the first time they do this, and we work with very young patients before preschool patients, because unfortunately I see myopia already, high degrees of myopia even then. And we work with these patients to, the first time you take the lenses off, it's like their face changes. You could look at the smile that's on their face and they can't believe they're looking around. You took those awful glasses away from them. I mean, this is a young human being with a disability and you just eradicated the disability. Yeah, it's temporary. They're going to wear that lens, they have to wear that lens at night, but you've given them freedom. And all of a sudden you watch those patients and they change character right in front of you. And they do different, their life has changed. I mean, how do you do that for human beings? That's an amazing thing to change someone's life like that. You guys are right on. I mean, I get to do this all the time. I mean, I have as much of a smile on my face. I've done 10,000 patients or more, consults and what I've done in my own practice, and I still smile every new one that comes through there. When we do that for the first time with them, and I look at the parents and they're just like their mouth is just dropped because it's just an amazing thing.
We collect these videos on my YouTube page for my practice, and you can see these young people, that have been doing it maybe for a month, or maybe they've been doing it for 10 or 15 years, and you can just sense how happy they are doing this. And like I said earlier, and like Carrie was referencing, I'm excited about it, they're excited about it, and you can just feel that. If you get a chance to check out that YouTube page, we have got a bunch of stuff on there, and it's just so much fun to do. So if you go on YouTube and you go to Auburn Optical, so if you pull up Auburn Optical on YouTube, you'll see we have a number of videos there, and you can just see, and some of these kids are shy kids, and they're so happy they want to talk about it. I mean, it's just awesome stuff.
The thing that maybe I'm not stressing this point enough. Like when I run the booth in an exhibit hall for another meeting, and I meet ODs all the time and try to tell them about our group, about our meeting Vision by Design. And like, I just assume that the person has the care of their patients in mind. I just make that assumption. That's important to you. And what I say is like, oftentimes I hear, patients are going online for glasses and contacts. I've heard stories about, they're asking for the prescription before the exam is even done. They're not sticking around. I'm not getting these quality patients. And I look at it from that point of view and say, an Ortho-k practice is going to build you a very loyal, very referral friendly system. and myopia control program is investing you back in the lives of your patients, and that's good for business. I mean, if you want to look at it from just that point of view, just a dollars and cents point of view, it seems like myopia control, has the potential to solve a lot of these issues that the modern OD is facing. What do you guys think? Paul?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And so much so that when patients come to see me specifically for Ortho-k, when a parent brings the kid in for, because I am a primary care practitioner as well. A lot of times they might say to me, "Oh, do you do regular eye exams too?" Of course I do. Yeah, of course. I'd be happy to take care of you and your other family members. And so you really do build a practice that way. As we like to say, how many eye doctors' offices did this patient drive by on their way to you?
Right.
Exactly. They came to you for a reason.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, once they're there, they stay.
And that also brings up Carrie's comment earlier that I think when you're doing myopia control, when you're having these conversations, and they can be as simple as we talked about visual hygiene earlier, I think you form a relationship with your patients, and I know for a fact this is true of Carrie and Paul and I, and that is that you form this bond, this relationship that is much deeper than it is with someone who doesn't care about that aspect of their vision or doesn't care about that aspect. I think people sense that you care and want them to be a happier person or in a more successful prescription type of thing. I just think it forms a much deeper relationship.
I challenge my patients to do the same with their lives. I say, you make your life as meaningful as mine is to me. So it's definitely, you're walking the talk, basically. So you just ask them, I challenge you to use that brain you have, that ability you have, to make your life as meaningful as this. So that's how I view what we're doing. It's for me, it's the ultimate in what you could do for another human being.
I think that's well said. Well, with that, if there's anything else anybody wants to add, I think we've pretty well covered, everything from the post. And again, love that the person posted it, and I hope that this discussion kind of helped flesh out the viewpoint of the AAOMC, or at least 3 of its very valued board members. So, Paul, Carrie, Matthew, is there anything else you guys want to add?
There's one thing that I would like to add, and that is if someone is reacting to the concept of myopia control from a place of fear, then I ask that person to try to become as educated as possible in the concepts so that maybe the fear will be reduced for them and they'll feel more comfortable embracing some of these concepts. I think sometimes people are just so afraid they're going to be left behind, or they're so afraid that they're not going to be involved in a trend or not going to be involved in something that's important, that they react out of fear. And I just want to make sure that people aren't reacting out of fear, but that they're as educated as they can be.
Excellent point.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'd like to mention our upcoming meeting. That's good.
Yeah.
That's Vision by Design, which is going to be May 15th through the 19th at the Hyatt Hill Country Resort and Spa in San Antonio, Texas. And there's information about registering in the agenda at orthokmeeting.com. And this is the best way to jumpstart your myopia control practice. It's also the best way to, if you already have one, to come in and learn what's new, what's current, and I'm telling you, it recharges your batteries. You walk out of that meeting really fired up to just continue doing this and continue spreading the good word about myopia control.
And I've posted this a number of times online. There is no friendlier meeting in all of eye care. There's just not a meeting where people are as willing to share ideas. They're as willing to help you. I mean, you'll run into people who they want you to be successful because they believe so much in this.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, you'll learn more in the hallways than you will from the podium.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a great group to network with. So come on down. Come to Vision freaking by Design.
Well said. We'll close on that. And I just want to say thank you to Paul Levine and Carrie Herzberg, and of course Matthew Martin, who is very involved in that boot camp program. So if Ortho-k is something that you want to bring to your practice, come learn from the best. Come learn from Matthew Martin and the rest. Caroline Kauke, Tom Washevsky, Rob Garowitz, Nick Despeditas is amazing in that program. There's a whole bunch of other speakers, and our agenda is online. So come to Vision by Design if this is something that you think you want to do. And thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you,
so
Matt.
much.
Thank you for everything that you do for our academy as well.
Yes, we very much appreciate you.
I appreciate you saying that. All right.